Welcome to the 15th episode of the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we're speaking with Mike Wagner, an excellent science teacher, GIS leader, director, and should we say curriculum developer?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah? Okay, in Loudoun County Public Schools. So let's start with the part that I already botched. What is the curriculum/GIS piece that you do? That's really like a very unique thing.
So my official title is GIS lead teacher for the Loudoun County. So in that role, I oversee the geospatial science course that's offered at the high school level for juniors and seniors. Dual enrollment with James Madison University.
Great place.
Yes, it is. And I also help to integrate geospatial technology into K-12 curriculum. So I work with the science office in that capacity.
So what kind of technology? Like, what does that mean?
So that is the use of spatial data and looking at things more spatially. So we have a software through ESRI called ArcGIS Online. It also is a Arc Pro, which is a desktop version that we use in our high school courses. But ArcGIS Online is available to any teacher anywhere in the country. ESRI gives it for free. And basically, it allows you to look at things, look at data and information spatially. And, we talk about a lot in education about spatial thinking, increasing problem solving and spatial thinking skills.
Right.
And that's what this really fits with. Any subject area can use it. I've had English teachers use it for character development and following character development in a book. For example, like Huck Finn goes down the Mississippi River. So you stopping in places, adding it to the map. Okay, where was that? Bringing that real life geography to.
And does it actually create like a map? Like students would have a visual that accompanies, say, with the reading, or they can add as they go?
Yeah, and they can add as they go, and the beauty of that is you can put a point on a map and say this is this particular point in Missouri on the river, and then there's a text box that pops up that you can add information to, so the student can actually do a summary of what happened in that part of the book, and then move on to the next location and do that. There's also a component of that called story maps, which you can actually create your own story through the use of pictures and videos and maps and web pages or links to web pages. So you can actually do a lot with it, and we're seeing a lot of success with that, teachers, but not a lot of people know about it yet. So that's what we're trying to get the word out for that.
Hopefully this helps. So, obviously you have a cool application in English, but this is targeted
mainly science.
In science. I feel
social science.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like the social studies teachers can make a ton of use of this. As an English teacher, I'm like, yes, Huck Finn. I literally have 75 copies of Huckleberry Finn sitting in my office right now. So that works for me, but probably the most obvious applications would probably be in a history or geography class, but this is categorized under science, right?
Right. So Loudoun County categorizes under science, but it is, you're right. The social studies teachers use it very often, or should be using it very often, because it goes along with their curriculum. Geography, world geography, going along, there's a lot of different information about the different battles and different wars that have gone on over time all across the world. One of the things that we do, that there's a lesson that we do with our geospatial students. There's actually one organization put together every location of every bomb that dropped in Japan.
Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, no. In the Vietnam War. I'm sorry. The Vietnam War. Every single one. There was about 1.2 million points.
Holy crap.
So they map that out. They find the hot spots about where. So the whole lesson is about cleaning up the ordnance now, even
like anything that's left.
Right.
Over. So that's cool.
And so that's one of the, so there's an aspect of the spatial looking at that. So where was the heavy damage? Where were the ordinances left behind potentially? But also what happened in that conflict? Where if you add on to that, you can very easily add on to that troop movements. So where were they going to? Where were they coming from? Where were the bombs dropped? Why were they dropped there?
Yeah, overlay pre-existing populations or something that's pretty cool. There's probably not as high tech in terms of the technology used to make it, but I'm just thinking of different applications. There's a lesson I usually do towards the end of the year on nuclear war, like nuclear bombs. And so we read a Dr. Seuss book the Butter Battle book, which is awesome, and then a Kurt Vonnegut speech, and then I show them, and there's a few different versions on YouTube, but it's like, I think 12 minutes, and it shows every nuclear explosion in the history of the world, but it stops at like 1995, 98, something like that. But it's basically the same thing, and the kids love it, because you can give them the number, and they go like, wow, that's a lot, but then when they sit and watch it, like, that's that, like, the spatial and visual piece, like, when they can actually see and visualize it, at the end... and I don't tell them what to think about. I just go, I don't know. It's the thing you should think about, but I don't know what, to walk away with. I tried it one year without showing the video because we had like an assembly or something. Bombed. The whole lesson bombed. So I'm thinking, like, for a social studies teacher or for certain things in science, you could probably do a lot. I mean,
yeah. And there's another example would be, every battle of the Civil War has been mapped out over years, and there's actually a time slider that when you start to let the time slider go and all the points automatically populate on the map, you can actually see where the Confederate and Union forces came from, and where the early battles took place, where the ending battles took place. It's really cool to see that timeline.
Yeah.
And you don't get to do that with a paper map. You don't get to do that unless you have a series of maps that show you, like static maps, that show you, this date and this date and this date. And,
and even because you could do multiple movements, I was even just thinking, like, I saw a history teacher one time who had a map, and he had, like, chess pieces almost, and he moved them to show movement. But he has to keep moving them, and he only has two hands, and there are more than two things moving at a time. So even that, which was a cool idea, really isn't, like, an accurate visualization. Have you... I don't know if this is too picky, but I know some kids who really like the AP Human Geography class, which is through social studies. And that's like, it's labeled as geography, but a lot of it really has to do with like culture and interactions between groups. Like, I feel like that would be a place because it has the geography in the title, but the students, I haven't taken the class, but it sounds like you're really talking about the interactions between people or the development of populations in places like. That's a thing that's probably a lot easier to learn if you can see it.
Yes, and that is that's what we're trying to get the word. That's what I'm trying to get the word out to social studies teachers, more science teachers as well.
Right.
I attempted to train social studies teachers early on when the desktop software was out and available, because we also were given that as a district. The problem was that it was very cumbersome to use. A lot of teachers got turned off by it because it was taking so much time and too much to just create what they wanted to create for it.
It's deep learning.
Now with ArcGIS Online, it's a completely different environment. It is so much easier. It's very user-friendly. Kids can use it with just picking it up, and they learn it really quickly.
Right.
There's not much to it now, but I'm overcoming the fear of, well, we tried this desktop version, it was hard.
It's better.
But now this is much easier, and it's been around for the last 4 years.
4 years. Okay, so that was actually what I was going to ask, is when did you start? Because we, full disclosure for listeners, we used to work together at Heritage High School.
Correct.
And I think I was still there, and that's when I think you were getting started with this. But I believe you were still full-time at Heritage before going into the split role. So, like, how long has either the program or the class or the idea existed?
So we've been running the class I started in 2002, 2003. 3 years later, we started, so 2005, 06 is when we started the course.
Okay.
We piloted it at Heritage for 3 years.
Right.
And then we, about 3 or 4 years later, we started expanding out to other schools.
Okay.
And now we're in, right now, 9 of the 15 high schools.
9 of 15 high schools. Yep. Yeah, because I remember, and I didn't realize it had already been running. Like, I was under the impression it was a little bit newer. You basically started it right around the time I started teaching. But I know you had, like, the large printers ready to, like, print maps and all that. And I had a student who was really into the class who then TA'd for me. And so she basically relayed that most of my previous knowledge of this basically came through a student who really loved the class. But so you piloted for 3 years?
Yep.
Is that a matter of, like, say, you learning and developing a curriculum? Or was that a county request? Because I know sometimes they just say no to a new class. And sometimes when they do say yes, you pilot it and as quick as they can, they try to roll it out to other schools. So you had time to develop, which in a way is a good thing. Was that?
So
I feel like that's
the way it all got started was there was one of the JMU professors, Dr. Bob Culver, came up to Loudoun and was introducing this new course. They had been only doing they had been only doing the dual enrollment for one year, or they were in their first year, and they wanted to get new schools involved. So he came in to do this presentation for teachers, trying to propose, and the science office invited teachers who were interested or possibly interested in learning about it. And just a year before, we had a training that dealt with geospatial technology. That time it was on those clunky desktop computers, but it was really cool. I fell in love with it then. And then when this was introduced to us, a colleague of mine who was working at Heritage at the same time decided that we were both sitting there listening to it, and right at the end, we were both like, oh, we want to do this. Like, we want to take this on. So there was no course. It was the geospatial semester is what they were proposing, dual enrollment, but the district could create their own course. JMU would help us out. So that's why we piloted it for 3 years. It was building the curriculum for it.
So in a way, you were almost teaching the class before you fully had the class. I mean,
right.
You have stuff. You have the university connection. Like, I'm not implying you're like winging it outright, but it's a thing you sort of built as you went.
Right.
And I know for sometimes, they, depending on the situation, and this is more for, say, an elective where there is no connection to a university or whatever else, they want a full curriculum before you even get to pilot it kind of deal.
Right.
So this got done in a different order. How, well, I guess it's going to depend because you have what, you said 9 schools?
Yep.
9 schools. So it probably plays out a little differently in each one. How has it developed? Like, how is the class different now than it was in year 3, once you sort of got it rolling?
So once we got it rolling, it was nice to have a different school's perspective, and basically the way JMU does it is they're there, they come in and visit once a month. They are the teacher of record on the JMU end, so we don't need to have certification to teach it. We get trained. Part of my job now is to train new teachers to keep ongoing training for teachers we currently have.
Right.
I work very closely with the JMU folks in that realm, and they offer staff development for our teachers. But it's more of, if a teacher wants to learn about it and teach the class, they can. Like, right. It's not that you have to go to school and get this degree and then or in so many years get this degree or build up so many classes of PD. Right. And that's the beauty. And we can have, it's in the science department. It's listed as a science course, but it's a general elective. Right. And we did it that way because then a social studies teacher, a CTE teacher, a science teacher, anybody could teach that course. Right. Because it applies everywhere. It's not just one area. And if you look at the career field now, there is such demands for geospatial savvy students coming into work in the workforce in things like marketing and business, and it's wide span. Yeah. As a matter of fact, the Department of Labor just deemed it as one of the high need fields in the next 5 years. Wow. So it's really something that gives kids skills that they can use in the workforce, right. And they do it now in the high school. But getting back to how it kind of evolved, we piloted for 3 years. When I went to other schools, we got a different perspective because every school teacher can teach it like based on their strengths. So if I'm a social studies teacher and I'm teaching AP Human Geography, I might do a lot of the lessons built around human geography and put my spin on it, but then use some out of science and some out of business. Because what we try to do is we give the students a wide view of what GIS can do and where it could apply. So we don't, even though we have our own comfort fields, for me it's earth science, for somebody else it could be, AP Human Geography, for example. But you put your own spin on it, but we have a curriculum now that gives them an opportunity to see where this applies in all fields. Right. And including military uses, because military is the one that developed the geospatial technology in the first place. So
yeah. I mean, just thinking in terms of like job opportunities or the skills that go with it, you're right, because like it applies so broadly. There's so many different things you can do with it. And when you said, in the next 5 years, for whatever reason, both genuine interest, random paranoia, like I've been reading a lot about automation lately, and the idea that at some point in between 10 and 50 years, we just won't really have people driving trucks, or at least not the long haul kind of thing. But that means like there are still people responsible for doing the mapping and creating the data upon which the algorithms are going to function. But, we're not so far along that the robots teach the robots yet,
Right.
So this is a place where, pun intended, you still get to be in the driver's seat a little bit, and you could do it in everything from logistics to military to marketing. I mean, there's probably a lot of different places you can use it. And there's probably, I would imagine there's more coming. Like we'll figure out more ways to do this.
And what's really cool is that some of our students who really want to do a career in GIS, or they find that this is something that is of interest to them, some of them have been getting internships right out of high school because they have a skill that not many people have.
Right.
I recently had a student who went to college. First semester there, she did one of her projects using ArcGIS. The professor didn't think anybody knew about it, and he was so excited that she knew about it. And he's like, "Can we hire you as a lab intern, because we have graduate students who need to use this but have no clue how to use it."
Wow.
So now, since then, she's been using it in her and being able to do something, use that skill to teach others. And that to her benefit. So
yeah, and and that not only helps that student academically, but you think about all the other opportunities that come your way when you're working in the lab as a younger student, plus you're now spreading that on to the other students who needed the assistance with it in the first place. There's a lot you can do. So you said a lot about technology in terms of accessing geospatial, say mapping data, things like that. Are there any like tools in the classroom? Like, is there a lab opportunity? Do students go out and, use GPS and map points around the school? Or like, how much of this is through, say, a computer or Chromebook versus how much of this do they get to do on their own? I know that equipment's very expensive, so I'm not expecting that answer to be a lot, but is there anything that they do themselves rather than manipulating the data through a computer?
Oh yeah, so it's the software is a whole package, and it's a whole suite of different project apps that go along with it. So some of it is things like the collector app Survey 123, where they actually can create forms and go out and collect data out in the field on their phone. They collect all the data on their phone, fill out the form that they created, and it populates the map with all the information, all the data that's there.
Cool.
And then they can go and analyze that later on. There's one for what's called Workforce, where you can actually set it up to be a manager, and the workers, you can actually give them assigned jobs, and know where they're at in the field. So think about like a street department who all these different calls and that coming from the public around, like this needs fixed, or this is a problem,
right.
And all of them come in, and you're the manager, and you're kind of assigning, okay, these two I'm going to give these projects here, and they see it on the map, they know where it's at, they go and do that.
Yeah, and rather than have a literal checklist, like you can have it on the map so that you can see, and track where people would be. Not to get away from the classroom stuff, just as you said that, like the roads crew thing, I never even thought about that, but that's like a great way to improve the efficiency, and maybe even to provide some oversight from management without actually having to drive site to site. We sort of know where you are. If you were doing this as a local government, is the cost prohibitive? Like, as a school, we rarely pay, say, full commercial price for things like this. If you were, say, the town of Berryville, or you're the town of Purcellville, something like that, is this something that they actually can use now, or is this something they would still be waiting for prices to drop on?
I would imagine that when you look at it in the overview, the amount that the software costs, you're easily going to save that amount in terms of efficiency.
Right.
So it really depends on, do you have somebody who knows how to use it and start to use it, get to know it and understand it, and start getting better efficiency in your work, or do you just go about doing things the way you've done them?
Right, and that's a tough sell.
And the beauty of that is if you start using that type of software, then you can track everything from incoming messages or things like you can set up a form. And a lot of Portland, Oregon is one example of a city who they actually have forms for public complaints. Mm-hmm. So if there's something you want to complain about your town, if there's a graffiti on that wall, or there's a pothole here, or that fence needs fixed, they can literally fill out a form. It populates the location and what's the problem. And so instead of workers going out there and looking for these things, the public is telling you this is where the problems are.
Yeah, you got to hunt it down and then figure out what the problem is. Yeah. When you show up, you're ready to fix it at that point.
Right. You know? Or taking a billion phone calls, right? Instead of taking a phone call from a bunch of different people, it shows up on the map. They do it. They feel like the public feels like they have control over, what they're saying about their community, and then people are responding to that.
Yeah.
So
it's really cool.
Yeah.
So with the student piece of it, so they do have hands-on opportunities and the rest. In terms of how that is implemented in different schools, since there's 9 schools with different teachers who have different strengths, which just my bias is that that's usually a good thing. Like a good framework and the right people in it. Like I like the idea that you could go school to school and not see the exact same thing, as long as in the end the kids are walking out with approximately the same set of skills. There's a lot of different ways to get there, and it lets a teacher play to their strengths. Assuming you have the right teacher in the room who's going to take it seriously. Do you, in your role as the lead teacher for this, do you see the different teachers using the technology differently? Like, is it noticeably different from school to school? Like, do some of them actually use the mapping stuff and some don't? Or is it fairly consistent in terms of the actual practice in the room?
Everybody uses the same technology, the same type of apps, just in a little bit different ways. Right. So, yes, you can go from class to class and see a little bit different things going on, but all the skill set, they're learning the same skill set.
Right.
And that's building the curriculum. We designed it so that there is a list of the skills, the geospatial skills they're learning, spatial thinking skills that JMU adds in, because spatial thinking is a very big thing for JMU. It's not about anybody can go and learn how to punch a bunch of buttons on the software, or go out and collect data and learn how to collect data. But can you analyze it? Can you ask questions about it?
Right.
And can you find out an answer? And the students' final projects that we're the only school system that buses them down to JMU to present on campus.
Okay, is that a yearly thing? I know I've seen you post stuff about it. Yeah.
It's an important thing to us, because that is it's the ending of that college course. It's showing them that that we really value this college experience. And with one of the professors coming in once a month, they get a good relationship with their students, even though they're not seeing them every day.
Right.
But they're teaching something every time they come, and something new. And they get to see the students, so they start to work. They work with them, and then seeing their final project, and those students, they get grilled on their final project. Like, they're asked, we don't want to know how you did this using the computer.
Right.
We don't want to know that. What was your question? What question were you trying to ask?
Right.
And do you believe you came up with a solution to that, or do you think you got something out of the analysis that could be used? And what value does this have to other people? Right. That's what they're focused on.
Yeah. Cool.
Which is what we in Loudoun want to do, right? We want them to be thinking for themselves, problem solving. We want them to, kind of take up tasks and, okay, well, here's a problem. How do we try to solve this?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this would align. I don't know. I haven't done the PBL, Project-Based Learning training yet. I got that coming soon. This month, actually. Initially I was like, I'm in, and then I couldn't get signed up for it, and then I was like, I quit until eventually I have to, and then that's coming now. But based on everything that I've heard, both from administrators, other teachers who have both done the training or been more involved in the goal of doing more project and inquiry-based stuff, I feel like this fits very nicely. Like the county's moving, and maybe broader public education is moving in a direction where this class might be well positioned for growth. I mean, it's not like we have to profit off the thing necessarily, but, when you create a course or when, you've championed this, you obviously want to see it get bigger and better and not smaller. And it sounds like the direction we're going. I would be surprised if more schools don't embrace this sooner, right?
Well, and what's interesting is that from day one, this has been a project-based course.
Right.
There is no written test. Right. This is, can you show us through projects how you can A, integrate the software and use the software, to B, ask questions, C, analyze that data, and D, come to some solutions. So it's not about do you know the terminology? Do you know, that's not what is this about? Right. This is project-based. And now seeing the focus be on project-based, it's like, oh, we've been there.
Hey, we're here. Thanks for catching up.
Right.
Losers.
But yeah, so that's rewarding to see that is what we've been doing. And for that reason, we've had a lot of students really connect with this class because they finally get into a course where it's, I don't have to study this, learn this, and know the material and just, for lack of a better term, just rewrite it down on a test, right?
You have to be able to do things that involve thinking.
And it's hands-on, it's computer-based, it's learning at their own pace to a point. There are deadlines and you have to make sure that you're within that, but if it takes you 3 hours and somebody else 2 hours to learn how to do that particular skill, okay, that's fine.
Do students tend to work more individually, or is it group based, or the way you just said that, learning at your own pace? In my head, I flashed to working on your own at first to figure out what you're doing, and then before you're done, you have to figure out how to do bigger things with groups. But that isn't necessarily the best way to do it.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
We spend the first part of the year, just the first maybe quarter, getting very familiar with the skill set, building their skill set. And that's very much individualized.
Right.
And then that becomes into working with partners and peers for small projects.
Right.
Taking those skills that they learned, and so that it's not so daunting. It's, hey, I remember how to do this skill, and I know this skill very well, and this is what we can use to solve this particular on this project. And then the midterm that they do is with a partner or a small group, and then sometimes we do class projects where they're all involved. Right. For example, we're about ready to embark on, and I'm really proud of this one. We're going to reenact the census, every aspect of it. I'm actually working with one of the colleagues in AP Government.
Okay.
That they've created the questions on what to ask.
Right.
And they've done it from a government standpoint.
Right.
So, what is it? What do you want to know? What do we want to know from students and staff? And then that's going to eventually be put on a survey.
Right.
For the geospatial students, it's about, how do we collect this data?
Right.
How do we manage it and put it into different scales? Mm-hmm. You have heritage as a school. You have homerooms. You have grade levels. So how do we best visualize that?
Right.
And then it's going to be going out and collecting it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, there's so many different ways to apply this, and the way you said that, with visualizing the rest, in the whole time we've been talking about this, and I don't want to get too far off track, but I can't decide if this is a thing as a student that I would absolutely love or have no idea what I'm doing with, because for spatial things, as a kid, I had to take a test to do gifted ed stuff, and I scored high in everything except in spatial reasoning, where you move blocks and make pictures. No one told me why I was taking the test, so when I left, I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't make any of the block pictures. To this day, I have a garden, I build stuff in the yard, I do all this stuff. I am useless until I see it. And so my wife makes fun of me all the time because if I don't draw a picture or I can't walk out and actually look at what I'm doing, I am almost incapable of just randomly visualizing the spatial aspect of something. But once I see it or I have a map, I'm good. And so I'm thinking, you're talking about How do we group the data? Like, do we do homerooms? Do we do grade levels? Do we do it by classes and the rest? And I'm thinking, like, I feel like for me that would be a nightmare until someone showed me the map. And you're like, here's the map in your groups. And I'd probably be okay. I don't know how that works. Like, in working with this, do you find students who struggle in the acquisition? Like what I just described, where like, I can read a map. I'm good for that. I have a good sense of direction. But man, if you just want me to figure out something from the abstract and it requires spatial reasoning, I'd really, really struggle with it. And I don't know why. Do you find students who get into the class and just have trouble with that kind of critical thinking? Or do people sort of acclimate quickly?
They definitely have their strengths, and we have a mix typically every year. You see, they kind of like, you see who's there's so many different aspects of the GIS that you have the data analytics, and you have those kids that are so strong in data analytics. They can look at a bunch of data, and they can play with it. They can run all kind of processes on it, and come to see some analysis, some solution to that.
Right.
There's others that don't see the data very well, but they're very creative. So their maps look incredible. Like they can take the data that this kid just did the analytics for, and they can make it look great for a public view, or where it would be in public. And there's a niche for that in there. And then you get the computer science geeky kids who, there's Python programming built into the software. So they can go at it with the programming aspect and make processes easier.
Right.
And that's what they really get into.
Yeah.
And you get others that are more of the data collectors, and they like to go and figure out how can we collect new data and bring it in, but they're not as strong with an analytics. You can see how, like, throughout the year the class kind of molds, and you get a good view of who's in kind of what sector, and they all, by the end of the year, they're all working really well together.
Right. Well, you find your place, and then you find the team that needs a guy in that place, and that's
right.
Yeah, I don't know. That, like, there are parts of this where, there's certain times I hear about cool things going on in schools, whether it's in the county or elsewhere, and I think, like, man, I wish we had that when I was in high school. And I'm like 75% feeling that way about this, and there's 25% of me that in the back of my mind is like, oh God, what would I do? Because some of that can be hard to think about depending on how you do it. But I guess you're right. There are enough tasks and there's enough things to do where if students are working in groups and you do have the opportunity to work with the others, you get to set a little bit of your own timeline and things like that. I mean, that's all the project-based stuff you'd really want, right? You find what you can do and you do that.
And everything we've talked about, or I've been talking about here, about the class, we use a desktop program. So the desktop program is where you really get the nuts and bolts of everything. Mm-hmm. When you're using ArcGIS Online, there's a bit of that, and you can kind of, but it's easier for each student, even though they don't have the same strengths, to be able to analyze the data, to be able to create really cool graphical output. You could go and collect data very easily. So that's where the online version makes this so much more in the hands of everybody. It doesn't matter what level you're at. We've got second graders who are making story maps of the Chesapeake Bay. It's that easy to use, and there's that difference. In our classes, we really get into the nuts and bolts, and that's where you really kind of see the students kind of like move out into their niche in GIS, assuming that they may go into the field. Right. But not everybody goes into the field. I mean, we've had students who now have a skill who are going to maybe go into marketing. And as soon as they say, I've got GIS background, when they go in, for a job interview, that's going to give them a leg up. Because now, you understand what we're trying to do with the marketing aspect, or who we need to target. Yeah. You know that you have that idea of how that's done. Great. Yeah. So that in this, it's what's interesting too is I talked about the students before about getting that different student coming into the class. These students who find the careers have been these students who love the hands-on aspect, and they've been longing for some type of class that has this hands-on aspect.
Let me do something.
Right. Let me do something. Let me think about this. Let me problem solve. And then they get in from day one, and you can almost see that light bulb go off. And like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. And they may not major in it, but they certainly now know what area or what field will better suit them, because they've been taking all these subjects and maybe nothing's connecting, and all of a sudden it does. And,
well, and that, I mean, like you said, how it works in so many different subject areas. I think that's one of the things that we do. And I say we, I mean everyone, school almost everywhere sort of does poorly, is sort of the arbitrary lines we draw between subject areas. You know, like if you really want to get down to it, everything is just physics and philosophy, you know? And so unless we want to, you know, we could remove all the lines and you would just have physics and philosophy, and that's sort of what, you know, but we break things down so separate that sometimes even in a class, I mean, English, you know, what are you going to do? You give a speech, you write a paper, that there isn't necessarily a lot of action in it unless we record a podcast, which we've been doing a little bit in class. This is a place where you really get to both do things, but also connect things you're learning in other places. You know, there's going to be some math, there's going to be some geography, there's going to be some science. Depending on what you do with it, you could pull in, you know, you could easily pull in English, like you said. As a teacher, I think it's my better units have always done that. I have kids regularly tell me they learn as much or more history in my English class as they do in their history class. And I'm like, one, I'm flattered. Two, I hope that's not true. Never tell your history teacher that. But two, it's like, I don't feel like everyone's always going to be into the book. And so if you can connect this book or this writing to something else, I've just broadened my audience. And I've helped them to see a way that it's relatable or it's relevant. And so, say for the GIS class, or even using some of this technology in the other subject areas, it naturally breaks down those walls where all of the things you're learning come together, and no one ever had to make it. Like, that's one thing I think sometimes we do project-based stuff and we say we're doing something authentic. But a teacher or a group of teachers sat and worked very hard to take a thing that wasn't authentic and make it look like it's here you don't have any of that, right? Like, this is very much like organically, just all of it comes together. Of those kids who come in, whether they're your C student, A student, whatever else, do you tend to see them as more, like, I mean, if you had to say, you know, percentage of students, are more of them generally math and science kids who really like it? Or do you get, say, your arts kids, not that they wouldn't like it, but I mean, who latches on? Like, there's always like even if you don't have an intended audience, there's an audience that congregates, and like, what kind of kids do you think like the class the most?
That's a very interesting question, because I've tried to actually pull out data to see, like, is there a certain type of student that takes a class? Yeah. And there really is you really can't put your finger down on this type of student typically takes this course. It's really kids that want something different, or it's the dual enrollment credit that really, you know, is appealing to them. JMU is a very respectable college, right?
One of the most.
So you get dual enrollment credit to JMU. Right. It's going to transfer to wherever you go. Right. There's no guarantee that an AP course, even if you do get the credit, even if you do pass the test, right, that those credits are going to transfer, right? Yeah. So that's somewhere of how we get some of the students in there, and then when they get in there, like, oh, well, this is different than what I thought it would be, but this is really cool. So there's a lot of that happens at the beginning of the year as well. So as far as a type of student, there's not really one that I could put my finger on and say, one of my best students ever was a student who was very artsy, very creative. Mm-hmm. And for a final project, which I thought, when this was introduced to me the first time, I thought, this is never, ever going to work. I don't know how you're going to do this. But wanted to map out Middle-earth. Okay. From Lord of the Rings.
Right. That's tough. You got to create your own everything.
So how to create the entire geographic system. Yeah. Like,
you didn't get to download someone else's map and play with it. No. Like that's a lot of
We have all these different projection systems. Yeah. There was none that fit that. So literally created a whole new projection system for that particular thing. Now, had given more time, they're given about 2 months to do their final project. Given more time, it would have been way more spectacular than what it was. But let me tell you, at the time, that was back before ArcGIS Online. It was back before it was a much more easy system to use. It was incredible what the output was. And did a really good project. That was something that I'll never forget because that was one that that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
That
it's ambitious.
Yeah, very.
That's ambitious. That's awesome.
But that was a student who didn't really do well with the analytical part, the data crunching part.
Right.
But man, was creative.
Yeah.
And knew enough about the software that could create the projection system. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You can if you can do that well, even if it's somewhat incomplete, but you can do that well in 2 months. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't go to college, but that might be the kind of person that you just hire because you could probably learn an awful lot quickly. If you already have that much talent and you haven't even finished high school yet. Right. I love college, so I'm the last person to tell you, it's not a good thing, but man, if you can already, at that point, you're creating your own terrain, you're creating your own topography, you're doing all of this stuff. If you can take directions from a boss, I will hire you now.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah. And to be able to both have that on your resume, but to have those skills coming out of high school. So you said that this was initially presented to the county by one of the professors at JMU. Mm-hmm. How many other places in the state does this happen? Are there other counties, school systems that do it? Is this something that, we're both from Pennsylvania. Right. So is this something is there a school in Pennsylvania that's doing this? How widespread is this kind of class at the high school level, to your knowledge? For
a long time, the geospatial semester was the only state program that had multiple school systems involved, and giving dual enrollment credit at the high school level. Currently, I think there's 30 schools? I can't remember the exact number, but there's a lot of schools. There's from Luray County to Fairfax to Arlington to Charlotte to Albemarle to trying to remember some of the other counties, but there's a large number of different counties and schools within those counties who have the geospatial semester, and they add sometimes a school will drop off because the enrollment goes down and they can't support it. Right. But for the most part, they've been rolling very well and slowly expanding, that's what we've seen in Loudoun too. It's been a kind of a slow moving, really picking up steam with the number of schools involved, the enrollments in those schools. Yeah. So we've been slowly increasing.
Yeah, and and with like I said, with the push towards more project-based and interdisciplinary stuff, knock on wood for you and for the program, but I would assume that continues in that direction. I would assume you're picking up and not losing steam at this point as more schools are looking for how to do basically something like what you've described. I just had a thought, as you name some of those counties, as you move across Northern Virginia, we're working on average with wealthier counties, with places that are more either urban or suburban. But you also named a few rural counties in there that are maybe closer to JMU, but these are rural and agricultural places. This is probably something we need for young farmers. Mm-hmm. I just read a book by a farmer, and he talked about the rural brain drain, how the smartest kids from rural towns all go to a city and go study something at a university and do whatever. And he says that as a result, we have a lot of either poorly run farms, or we end up with a lot of very large corporate farms because no one knows how to do what they're supposed to do. And man, if there isn't a million ways to apply this for land management or a more efficient use of even a small farm, I feel like this is probably more valuable in Clark County or Luray County or one of those.
Right, and not only with the land management, but you're talking about precision farming. I mean, you outfit. It's almost like what you can do with a drone. You could take a tractor with a GPS, and you can actually set how you need to go and harvest your crop in the most efficient manner, or keep up with the fields you have.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother industry of this.
Yeah. Since reading the book, I just keep thinking of all the ways that, like, he as a farmer says this, and I think I don't think the stereotype is necessarily true, but the stereotype is real, that when you think of the average farmer, we tend not to think of a very smart person. But he pointed out how, like, if you went back in time 150, 200 years, and then before it, anyone who was even a decent farmer was generally considered one of the smartest people around.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they didn't have all the tools to collect the data. So, like, you really had to know what you were doing to keep it running. But you think, like, this is the kind of tool that, one, is interesting in all the different ways you can apply it in a million different fields. But I would almost, if I was working at JMU, I'd probably be thinking, how do we pitch this in the places where people can make a daily hands-on use of it? And in a rural setting, like, sky's the limit, and maybe reverses some of that sort of brain drain, so to speak. You know, that right. You said, did they have it here in Clark County?
They had it in Clark County here for a little bit. And then a lot of it, especially in a small school system, it's teacher driven. So if you have a teacher that is interested in teaching it, and they learn how to use the software, you know, to be able to teach the course, then it runs.
Right.
But as soon as that teacher would leave or retire or whatever, then unless you have somebody else waiting in the wings that really wants to do that course,
right,
it doesn't
drops off.
Right.
Yeah.
So it happens in some of the smaller school systems.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have the staff or the student body, so yeah, one hiccup could be trouble. So this was presented by a professor, and you
who's
and a
now
colleague,
the ISAT dean.
Oh, really? Okay, all right. So he's making moves. That's good. But so for your education, your background, like, you were already very comfortable with maps, right?
Yeah. So my bachelor degree is in meteorology. I was a meteorologist for 3 years. Right out of college, I moved up to Boston, right outside of Boston, working for a private weather forecasting company. We would do forecasts for utility companies, newspapers, things like that. It really opened my eyes to that whole industry because I never knew who all needed in-depth forecasts. I never knew that when we turn on our gas furnace, that gas is coming from somewhere and is being sent through pipelines from far away.
Right.
In our case, probably down in the Gulf.
Right.
And they need to know how much gas to have up in this area so that we can heat our homes.
Right.
So we were doing 7 to 10 day forecasts specifically for temperatures for individual cities. Like, for example, we would do regions. So I was on the southeast desk for a while, then I was on the northeast desk. And in there, I would have maybe 25, 30 cities that I forecast for in depth, 7 to 10 days. And our accuracy was tracked because it was something that, you know, if we weren't very accurate, or as a company, you're going to cost the gas company money.
Right.
In which then they have to buy extra gas from somebody who's going to really up the price.
Right.
Supply and demand. So it was, but we had shifts. They were 12-hour shifts, night, daytimes and nighttime. So it was like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 9 p.m. to 9 a.m.
Right.
And I looked at that, you know, sitting there, and as much as I love weather forecasting, that's not something I want to keep doing for the rest of my life. You know?
Yeah.
Someday I wanted a family. I wasn't married then. Wasn't dating. Really anyone that was, just that I thought we had a future together.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where I realized then that if I want to continue in this field, I'm gonna have to be okay with shift work, or because weather happens 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? 24 hours. So you got to have the desk manned during that time. So that wasn't something that I could see myself doing for the rest of my life. And while I was there, and while I was in college, and one of the regrets that I have is not staying in college and getting my teaching certification while I got my meteorology degree, because I really had a strong interest in education then.
Right.
And I would love to go out and do school talks. Like anybody who needed it, I was like, oh, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And even up in Boston, I was doing school visits. And that was something that was interesting. I loved doing it.
Right.
So when I realized that shift work wasn't something I really wanted to do the rest of my life, it was a very easy move to go into education. So I kind of transitioned from there, moved back home to Pittsburgh. It's my home. That's where I grew up, and worked at the Carnegie Science Center. And I did education outreach there, so I would take school programs out to schools, and that gave me the kind of transition between the science and teaching. Right. And it was a natural fit to go into become an earth science teacher. A couple of years later, I went back to school. I graduated from Millersville University, so I went back to Millersville University, got my teaching certification, and met my wife, Megan, and we moved down. She was already here in Virginia teaching in Loudoun. I moved down as we were married, and I started teaching at Heritage.
Yeah. So back to school, going to teaching was a good move for you in a wide variety of ways, family and all the rest.
Right.
Thinking about, meteorology, like as you were saying that, I think it's one of those things like I realize there are more meteorologists than I see on TV, but there are probably way more than I would actually recognize. Like it probably takes a lot of people to create all the different forecasts and to use all the different data. What drew you to that out of high school? Like what made you decide meteorology was the college major for you? That is the $100 million question. It was it really was from a young age. I think it was about 8 years old. Just a passion for weather. It was, I couldn't wait for a thunderstorm to come. It was when I got so excited when a thunderstorm would come or there was a hurricane involved, and those are big events. But weather was, I just wanted to know more about it. Right. I wanted to know, why are there tornadoes in some areas and not in other areas. It was just something that was extremely interesting to me. Measuring snowfall and tracking that amount of snowfall year to year, So it was. That's kind of how my mind works. I'm like, oh, I see something. I love, to figure out. Okay, so how does that happen? And why does that work like that? And it was just, I got interested in the weather. It was something I was from a young age. I was interested in. Right. And I knew that was kind of like where I was headed. You can see my college path. Yeah. So no one was surprised, I guess, when you picked. So when a snow day was coming, you were the most excited kid, but mostly because you got to go measure it. Exactly. Right. Right. Like you were as pumped as anyone else, but not because you were going to play Nintendo or whatever. And having the day off helped. Yeah. I love to have the day off from school, but it was more about wow, that was a really intense storm, and being able to measure how much we got, and how fast the snowfall rates were coming, and it's very science geeky and nerdy, but that was me. That was and that's where that passion came from. So that's cool. If you had the GIS class in your high school, would you have taken it? Absolutely. Yeah. You see that now, but that was the kind of kid I was. I realize now that I'm older. Right. That I was one of those kids who are now sitting in my class that weren't the top student. I was good. I was a mid B student, right. Average. But had I had those hands-on courses. Right. And our high school didn't offer a lot in the way of meteorology or even earth science. Right. So even though I had this passion for weather, it wasn't until I got to college where I could really all right, I can do this. All in and do your thing. Yep. That's so if you're thinking about, say, your high school or grade school, either way, you're a solid student. You had a thing you're into that maybe the school didn't offer electives or have things for. Do you feel like your high school experience was valuable or productive? Thinking now as a teacher, right. When I ask someone this who isn't teaching, you get different kinds of answers, but being in the classroom and now you're seeing what happens in a school and all the different things that are offered to students, and maybe in some cases the things that aren't. When you think about your education, how does it stack up? Do you feel like they did well and you just didn't have the chance to take that class? Do you feel like there was a lot of things school didn't do for you that you found later? So I looking back on it, I see high school as being the place where you got your foundation. Mm-hmm.
in all the grade levels leading up to it, obviously you have to build a foundation all the way through every subject.
Right.
In high school, that becomes the foundation of whatever career you're going to choose. So it's having that wide-ranging experience in high school and being able to figure out, my strength is science and math. It's not as much English and social studies. Like you start to see it should be, and this is my only take on it, is high school should be the place where you figure out, what are my strengths?
Right.
And then you may not know exactly what field you want to go into in the future, but when you leave high school, you at least know, I'm strong in this area.
Right.
I'm not so strong in this area. I know what I really love.
Right.
And go pursue that.
So you gravitate in a direction.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. I feel like, I'm probably the same way. Like, my favorite classes were pretty much always English and biology. Like, I took a ton of bio courses. I was going to be a writer or a lawyer or a doctor. And in the end, I would teach English, but I just realized how much school and debt came with a couple of those, scared myself out of it. But no, like, I had a direction there. And I think about some people who, and students who are maybe more inclined to working in certain trades, would be a great electrician, welding, and we have a lot of things with good jobs, and we don't necessarily offer that to enough kids. We have those programs, but my personal opinion, I think we should expand that significantly, right? But say something like GIS is a little bit of the best of both worlds, because you do have the hands-on component. It is still a classroom activity, not entirely, but, in a way. And in a way, I mean, I feel like that makes it easier to execute. It's not easy to create the practice or lab space necessary for everyone to become an electrician or to build HVAC systems or whatever. Like, this is a little more contained, but still provides that hands-on thing. Mm-hmm. The way you said, like, I definitely would have taken the class. I knew what I was leaning towards. I think it's great. And it's probably one of several reasons that a class like this maybe should be in more schools. I think if administrators, taxpayers, school board, whoever has to make those calls, sees the value here, I think the same logic probably applies to a lot of other places, to a lot of other things we can do. But very specifically, because the way you describe GIS, like, it really does the interdisciplinary thing with the subjects we already have, I think it'd be hard to reject that. So as a teacher, or you can think former student, or you have kids in school, you think about them. If you got to make your own school, this is one of my big four questions. And think of it literally as you are given a building and a budget and the student body, but it's some sort of private school, charter school. Essentially no oversight as long as kids aren't dying. Maybe reasonable, but you could do anything. Like, in your mind, what would be the perfect school?
I think you have to provide opportunities for all student learners. So you have to have those hands-on experiences. You have to have those the learning from books and text, and you have to be able to go and have experiences. One of the things that I think is unfortunate is that we're doing less field trip, and not doing field trips just for the sake of doing field trip, right, going somewhere fun, but experiential field trips, like going out to that park or that nature center, mm-hmm, and really going out there and collecting data, or writing about an experience that you had or out there, or you experience nature, you experience this museum, or like there's, and I don't know where it, and I know budgetary restraints, that's where,
right,
but if we had more of those type of experiences where students are actually able to connect with something, and they may not like the museum that they're going to, but there's something there for you,
right?
Right. It's something you're going to connect with,
right?
And you may not like a nature preserve, but you're going to go out there and something there is going to connect with you in some way. So, I think we're missing some of that more of the experiential, and I don't mean just in the field trip. I'm talking about just if you want to get connected with a particular subject or learn more about it, then you can go a little bit further with that. Or, I think would have to be a more wide open curriculum, have more offerings, let's put it that way, and try out different things. Like, how are you ever going to know what you want to do unless you try those? Right. Some students I see now going through high school, and I don't want to say I cringe a little bit, but they're so focused on one thing or one area because they know exactly what they want to do. Now, I was one of those students, so I can't say
right.
But that's a good or bad thing. But when you learn, when you kind of put all your classes toward this one area, you kind of leave out the other things that might be interesting.
We should at least still have contact in the other places.
Right.
It's funny that you say that. Like, I know what you mean. But sometimes I at least like the idea that, like, we're making decisions, there's some focus. One of my biggest concerns, I think, right now is when I'm teaching, especially in the AP classes, I have kids who treat every class like they're equally important and like they're the most important. Now, I know that they're not all actually that important to them. I have kids who come and talk to me as though this is the most important thing, but I know that they don't really love the class. I mean, hopefully they don't hate the class, but... Like, you don't have to have an A+ in everything, and you don't need to take 5 and 6 AP classes. There's probably a middle ground, where, like, treating everything equally important is probably not helping you in the long run. Shutting yourself off from other options and only focusing on one thing too maybe is going too far in the other direction. Like, I know what you mean. I have some kids like that. I have like some kids who are really into computer science, and that's it. That's all they care about. When you think about what that would look like in a school, and I agree, the field trip thing. And I'm as guilty as anyone. I think I've done one field trip in 14 years of teaching, and another teacher actually set it up. But I went on a ton of field trips in school, and I think it was great. Do you think of this as the kind of thing where you said more offerings? Would that be more choice within subject areas, or is it some sort of interdisciplinary, like, you can have two teachers who work together, and I don't know how that
more of the interdisciplinary, because I think that's so why not have some experiences while you're doing PE along with science, and there are certain aspects, and that might be a bizarre combination, but you think about it, some of the skills that you're using out in PE, you can also apply to scientific topics. And
there's a ton of biology and psychology that you could really apply.
Right, and so there are connections, and I bring that up as a bizarre connection, but that's just to give an example of why not? Why not work together? Why not work with math and English? Those kind of experiences, like giving them a more real world, and I think that's where education, or at least here in Loudoun, is headed toward. Is this with the one little world and giving that real world experiences? I think we're headed in the right direction there,
right.
And I'd like to see more of that. More of to solve this problem, you don't just need science knowledge.
Yeah.
You're going to need to be reading up on that material. You're going to need to be, calculating things, and you're going to need into the math. Yeah, you're going to need the history of it.
In real life, we don't really draw the lines between the subjects the way we do in school, and that's what I said earlier. I know that makes things efficient and it's easy on paper and scheduling wise. Like, things are neat and clean, mostly because we figured it out. I mean, at least to an extent. But I don't know if that reflects the actual kind of work we want people to do, or the thinking we want students to be able to do. I think for the idea of trying to create a more interdisciplinary system, whatever that's the devil's in the details. But as an ideal school, I think a lot of people would probably latch onto that. I mean, kids would freak out when they had to figure out, how do I calculate a report card off of this? It's messy that way. But in the long run, that might carry more value for a lot of people. I don't know. Would you send your kids to a school like that?
I think I would. Yeah, I think it would be more, it would be difficult to possibly grade, but sometimes that part gets in the way, doesn't it?
Grades are the worst.
it's about the experience and it's about the knowledge.
Yeah.
And how have that's what I love about the geospatial course, is that it's about learning the skill, applying that skill. It's not about what, it's a skill that they're going to use. Yeah. So it's about applying that, and it's about taking something with you that is now tangible that you can use in whatever career you're going to go into.
Right.
And that's where I kind of draw this when you ask that question, the interdisciplinary. That's kind of where I'm drawing from.
Yeah.
That it's this. How do you give them the interconnectedness of all these different fields and something that they can apply in everyday life?
Right. Because
that's what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's...
Well, and as we said, there's so many different ways that it can be applied, that there doesn't have to be just one way to do it, but it is giving both the experience of it, the skills that go with it, and whether you walk out of there saying, I'm doing this as a job for the rest of my life, or I just know how to access or use this technology or use the information, like that's a thing you don't lose, ideally. People tend not to drop skills as fast as they drop memorized, facts. So that could probably play out well. Now for that, you said this earlier, but I'm not sure if I understood it. We have access to this in schools.
Yep.
Is there what was it? The ArcGIS?
ArcGIS, ARCGIS.
Oh, okay, ArcGIS. So is that something that is accessible to the public?
It is. If anybody can get a free trial of it, and then would need to, after that subscription runs out, and I think it's like 6 months, right? They would need to pay for the service.
Right.
Everything that students create,
right, can
be made public with a URL link that then anybody in the public can actually go see it. So they can create. We've had, for example, at the Academy of Science, a radiology class created a very good story map, an excellent resource on the opioid crisis. Mm-hmm. And they put a lot of information in there about places to get help. These are the reasons why this is happening, and it was a great resource.
Yeah.
And they sent that thing out to people in the public in public policy.
Right.
They could see that because they made it public for that reason.
Right, right.
And it was a simple URL, click on it, and goes right to it.
Yeah.
And it's out there. Yeah, I saw that as they highlight some of the story maps that are created using their software, and that's one for a while that they highlighted. And it's a really cool way to kind of connect with the public. But yes, the public could see them.
You can see it. You could have some access. Right. And that's something that, I know, I guess depending on where you live, but public libraries where they have subscriptions to databases. Mm-hmm. I know that some libraries do some services like that. I don't know if it's that one in particular. It's one of those things that I feel like this is the kind of thing, if I'm listening to someone else have this conversation, I hear it, I'm like, I'm going to go tinker around for a minute. Like, I want to see it. Right. So that's cool. So, all right. So we touched on this and I missed it. And this is really, really important. You're a weatherman. Still.
Correct. Yes.
Right? Okay.
There's still a passion for weather.
Yes. And so this is, we hit weather and I just completely spaced because I was thinking about the maps and like how all the school stuff goes. But in addition to being the lead GIS teacher and great science teacher and all the rest, you are my favorite weatherman, right?
Oh, well, thank you.
So it's Everyday Weather Services. You have it on Facebook.
Yes.
Do you post anywhere else?
No.
So
it's on Facebook.
So what got you to start doing, and I mean this for anyone who's listening who hasn't looked, Everyday Weather Services on Facebook, I find to be the most reliable local forecast, both because you're forecasting almost from my backyard. So I always tell people I can't get more local, at least for me. But you tend not to be very sensational about things. Some of the local weather pages and, everybody around Loudoun County, I'm not naming the competition, but knows there's a couple others that get very excited about snow. But because they're so excited, I always trust it. So, like, you give very reasonable, I'm always the first guy that says, so are we getting off school?
Right, right.
But what got you into doing that? Like, what what made your weather service happen?
So, being an operational meteorologist and having to do such detailed forecasts for utility companies and that, really, a lot of people, there's a stigma with meteorologists in general. You can be wrong 60% of the time or 90% of the time, whatever percent you want to throw out there, and still hold a job.
Right.
And though it is very difficult sometimes to do forecasts, there is a lot of science behind it. There is a lot of analytical parts to it that most people don't see.
Right.
There's a reason why we have supercomputers that are running these forecast models.
Yeah.
I mean, they're taking millions, if not billions, of calculations worldwide,
so many variables,
crunching, doing all these equations that simulate the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. No one human could do that on paper.
Right.
In any time frame to do a forecast, right?
No reasonably sized team of people could really do, especially that many calculations and probabilities, and my gosh.
And what people sometimes to be a meteorologist, you have to know what goes into those, and you have to understand thermodynamics, and you have to understand how the atmosphere works, and you have to, and so that what this model is showing you, because there's 20-some variables that you could very easily use on those models, but understanding what are those variables, how are they calculated, and what are they telling you? They look very good, they look very nice, and you can pick out different things. And a lot of hobbyist meteorologists or hobbyist forecasters see those, and they understand what that means, or what that particular color or that temperature range means, or seeing that the 850 millibar temperature is the key to the freezing on the ground or not freezing. Those kind of things, anybody could pick up and look at those models and say, oh, I understand that.
Right.
So if I see that here, then this is what's going to happen.
Probably going to happen, right?
But weather doesn't happen in just one place. So anything that happens in the Gulf, and we're expecting a nor'easter up here,
right.
One subtle change to that system in the Gulf is going to affect what happens upstream. So as meteorologists, we understand what those models are saying, and we look for what could go wrong. Mm-hmm. What is it that the model's not picking up? Because they're not perfect.
Right.
Neither are we. So you may see, these temperatures look a little off. Like it ingested temperatures that are not what was expected in the Gulf Coast states.
Right.
Which means that it's trending colder. And if it's trending colder, then how's that going to affect upstream? Or if it's more moist, so there's a lot more that goes into it.
Right.
And I would never go out and tell you or anybody that, hey, 7 days from now, we're going to have this whopper of a storm that is just going to dump tons of snow on us.
Right.
Like, the models can't be trusted that far out. There's no way that you can say accurately in 7 days.
Like they're getting better, but they're not that good.
Right.
Kind of deal. Yeah.
Now, I've been saying, I'm looking at things now, and we haven't had the best or coldest of winters.
Right.
That pattern is going to change, and it's coming. You can see that downstream. You can see that a pattern change is going to take place.
Right.
We're going to get into a colder spell, but to say that even 3 days out, that a storm is definitely going to dump this much snow.
Right. Right.
So I'm very cautious because I don't like the stigma that's put on meteorologists about that. You could be wrong.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to be rolling the dice and saying I think this is going to happen, but that far out. So my rule is that if there is a large storm, the only storm that in my lifetime that, looking back on it, we knew 7 days out was the superstorm of 94.
There was
the one that
93 and 96, I think.
Oh, 93. It was 93.
Yeah.
93 is the one that dumped snow from Georgia all the way up to New England.
Yeah.
And we had, I think in this area, it was like 30 inches.
Yeah.
But it was a huge storm. Looking back on the models nailed it about 7 days out. But that was the only storm in my lifetime that ever happened to.
Where they got a big storm that right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I give the information when I know that the information is accurate. That I know that there is a... If I'm going to say
what does that
anything,
usually mean, though? Like,
if
you normally, like... Because I'm thinking, you know, when I hear rumblings of storms coming, like, there's a chance of snow Saturday, I'm usually thinking, you know, you post something 2-3 days in advance?
Yep. So 2-3 days in advance is when I'll start talking about something. Unless it's going to have huge impact. So let's say that 4 days from now is a major holiday. Mm-hmm. If it looks like 4 days out, it could be something that's significant.
Right.
I may post something to say, just a heads up, there could be something for this weekend. Stay tuned. We'll talk more about that as it gets closer. But if you've got travel plans, that might be something you want to take into consideration.
Right.
But normally 2 to 3 days out is when I'll start talking about a system that could affect us. And then you'll never see me put out amounts of snowfall. And I mainly do just winter. Yeah. And it really started from all the teachers asking all the time, like, what do you think? What do you think this, when they last saw that I was a meteorologist before. And it was just a way that if I created the weather page, then they'd have one place that I could just put it out there.
You don't have to answer the same question 50 times.
Right. And I don't mind answering the question 50 times. It's just a matter of like responding to people, you know, with those questions. So it was just a place where I could put all that information there, and then everybody can digest it as they wish. So I'm never going to hype anything. I can't. I don't like that. The aspect of like getting people's hopes up that far in advance that something big is going to happen when most of the time that either doesn't happen or it's not to that degree.
That's my rule now. Don't believe the hype. Kids say we're getting off. I say, no, we'll be here. Even if in the back of my mind I think there's a chance. No, never going to believe it.
And if there's one place that it's where that meteorologists are wrong most of the time comes from, it's that. Yeah. Because the information's not there yet to say definitively one way or another. That's what I try to stay away from. And I have a lot of people, you know, as yourself, that say the same thing, that we really like the fact that you don't hype it. You just give us what's needed when it's needed.
I mean, I love. I've got a group text with some other teachers, and man, you hear any rumbles of snow, and the texts start flying, and it's funny. You know, people laying down bets on delays or off or how much or all this stuff, and I see some of the stuff that they send, like screenshots of random websites or other Facebook pages, and I was like, that's good. And you know, and sometimes I start to feel a little hopeful myself, and I'm like, hang on. Let me go see what Mike's got. Like, hang on before I get too far into this.
Well, it was funny is that, you know, my family will start seeing stuff on either social media or whatever. And you know, did you see this? Did you see that? Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. Well, what do you think? Well, yeah, I think it's a possibility, but at this point, it's nothing to be concerned with. You know, nothing to be concerned about or get too hopeful about. And then I'll start hearing more of they're posting a lot. Like, there's a lot of people saying there's going to be a big storm this weekend. Yes, it's still a possibility.
That's right.
But we're getting there, you know, but we need, you know, there's a lot that still can happen.
Don't jinx it. Stop talking about it.
So, yeah, I get that a lot. I get a lot of pressure that, hey, you know, it's isn't it time to make that forecast now? Or put something out? And like I said, I do it when I know that it's going to be in the range of accuracy that I feel is necessary. That it's not to get people's hopes up for something. It's more about the science behind it. Like, I'm a scientist, so I'm gonna make sure that I really take pride in accuracy, and I'm not always accurate with it. You know, I was only looking for 2 inches of snow on this last time, and we waited 4 inches. You know, and that happens, and.
But so, you know, it's something you can plan around, which is good. It's tough to make a plan around something that you think is being sensationalized, because then, you know, you're never going to make the right kind of plan. So it's good. But like I said, I both, it's great. So I recommend it. But I also, love that, just coincidentally we live near each other. So like, sometimes I'm like, well, I wonder if we're taking any readings soon. And I'm like trying to look over to your weather gear. Like, well, is he outside measuring anything?
And this is the time of year where I have my snowboards out. They're just two pieces of plywood sitting out there in the cold so that they can catch snow so I can officially measure it. Because I'm a co-op observer for the Weather Service, so I have to report it. I report it every so often with the measurements.
Awesome.
So.
All right.
But everyday weather services, if you want a forecast, that's not going to be.
There we go.
Up.
All right. Well, so while we're doing plugs, and I have one last very quick question. It's the easy one I end all these on. But you said you have some contact info or social media stuff for the GIS program for the classes?
So for the geospatial in Loudoun, for the GIS in Loudoun, I have a Twitter account at LCPS_GIS. Mm-hmm. For the teachers out there who want to know more about the ArcGIS Online, I have a Google Classroom site for that. My email, you can either contact me at michael.wagner@lcps.org, or you can do the GIS at lcps.org. We have our own email address as well. That's probably the easier one to remember. Yeah. But contact me and I'll get you hooked up with
that's good.
For some training.
And there's a broad enough application, and I feel like there should be interest all over the place. So hopefully we're getting the word out a little bit here. So all right. So last question, in theory, an easy one, whether for educational or intellectual interest or just for entertainment. Give me like a book or a movie or a couple of each. What's stuff that you really like? And you can take that any way you want, but give me some book or movie recommendations. What do you tell people about?
All right, so I was thinking about this. Educationally, I would have to say that anybody going into any field who eventually at some point in your career you're going to be in management, or you want to be in, you want to be high. The book that, when I was going through my, I have a K-12 administration degree as well, a master's in K-12 administration. And one of the books that we had to read was Good to Great by Jim Collins. Okay. That was one of I got the most out of that book. I'm not a reader, but that was one that they really talk about the management of your staff and having... They talk about this bus, and you need to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus. Right. And not only when you have the right people on the bus, but you need to get them in the right seats, because not everybody has a place. Right. And you gotta be able to figure out where those people fit on that bus and what seat are they best suited for. You look at any organization, whether it be a school, whether it be a business or whatever, and that so applies, and that was something that stuck with me. So that is
good to great.
Yeah,
good to great.
Movies, any baseball movie you can take anything from. I'm a huge baseball fan.
So I regularly make the argument that Bull Durham is the best sports movie of all time. Am I wrong?
You got something there. I think Bull Durham is really good.
Maybe the best sports movie of all time.
Field of Dreams for me was probably one of the best ones. Yeah. But you can't go wrong with a slapstick comedy like a Christmas Vacation or European Vacation.
Okay. Right? Yeah. We just watched that one recently. So awesome. All right. So before we shut this down, is there anything in the universe that you want to say or plug before you have a live mic and I do the work of posting? So is there anything that I didn't ask or we didn't get to that you want to make sure you mention? Or
I can't say enough. Like, if you're a teacher, and no matter where you're at, whether you're in Loudoun, whether you're somewhere else, if you haven't used ArcGIS Online or you want to know about it, let me know, because this is something I think can apply to every subject, every level, K-12.
Right. All right. Well, I will make sure to link it heavily on the website and steer some traffic your way. Mike, thank you very much for taking the time to talk.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it.